Welcome back to it. This is an exciting time. I just have to say, I'm so excited. This could be the last episode of Connect This ever of Connect This. Because I don't want to spoil a secret, but I got my bribe from AT&T. Did Kim, Doug, Travis, did you all get your AT&T bribes?
Well, I might have, but I have a high cost to get bribed, unlike you, Mr. Mitchell.
Yeah. Well, they do give you a free phone.
No, I just wanted to. My favorite story of the past 2 weeks that we weren't able to talk about until just now is AT&T not admitting that it might have accidentally bribed some people in Illinois or a person in Illinois to get some of its legislation through. And one of the classic Department of Justice responses of, well, let's just say that you don't say that you did it, but you pay a big fine because we all know that you did it and blah, blah, blah. And now the rest of us all pretend that that is the only place that it happened. So that's how I wanted to kick off the show. AT&T
I think
bribes.
you've probably known that I've been bribed by AT&T for years. You can tell by my pro AT&T stance.
And you can tell by his very luxurious wardrobe of
Yes.
AT&T just has they literally hired a person.
You're laughing, but do you know that these T-shirts are going for $1,000 on eBay?
That's what I was just gonna say. AT&T could just hire someone to go to like vintage stores, pick up those shirts, and send them to you, and there you go. Like that would be a wonderful way to do it under the table.
Right.
I'm Chris Mitchell with the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, and we got Travis Carter here from USI Fiber. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I am sitting in the middle of a cornfield in Indiana right now. So
Indiana.
We'll see how well this goes.
That looks like a cornfield. That looks really similar to a cornfield right now.
Okay, hang on. There is corn.
Well, there's what used to be corn. Yeah. So.
What are those?
If we wait long enough, an Amish buggy will drive by. So I'll be sure to pan so y'all can see it.
You should
Excellent.
if they drive by.
1 horsepower. So
yeah. We got Doug Dawson from CCG back again. Welcome.
I'm so happy to be here because it's morning. You know, my biggest issue with our show is it usually drives me to distraction and I have to drink immediately thereafter. And I can't do that today. This is going to be high tension day. So.
That's true. And I do appreciate the flexibility of everyone. I'm sorry it's a bad time for viewers as well. But I am heading up to see a comedian with my wife. And since I'm spending most of October far away from our house, wanted to make sure we got this in. Kim McKinley from UTOPIA Fiber. Welcome.
Thank you. And it's impressive, Chris. Your wife still likes you? I mean,
we'll find out. I mean, you know, I truly believe absence makes the heart grow fonder, and it's not the times where I'm gone that stress me out. It's when I come back and spend time with her that she'll figure out that she's made a horrible mistake. So we had a really great show 2 weeks ago without Kim, but it is so wonderful to have you back in studio, Kim. You know, I wish we could have 10 people on because Heather would be a wonderful regular, but Kim, I just feel like you know, I'm used to seeing you in the corner there.
Well, I did get a text from Heather later saying that she could be invited back if she upped her glasses game a tad. So
I would even give her a pass. I mean, she's so strong. She doesn't, she could wear whatever she wants on her face. We'll give her that liberty. Unlike everyone else who has to go through a strict screening process.
And thanks to Kim for getting up early this morning to hang out with us. She is the winner of the time zone challenge here today.
That's right.
I went for a run this morning and then came and did this. I had to relax. Unlike Doug, I can't drink either after this, so I had to get my stress out at some point and had to go for a run beforehand.
And as we finish off the introductory, important catching up, I spent 2 nights in Massachusetts, and both nights I tried chicken wings at different places. So I had a wonderful buffalo wings at Route 9 near Westboro in Framingham, I think. And then in Worcester, which is spelled nothing like that, I had some Jamaican jerk wings that were pretty good, had a nice amount of spice on them. But nothing beats wings with Travis. So, you know, I have to dock him a few points because they didn't have Travis there.
Is that because he pays?
Travis would have come if you wanted him.
Yeah, I think a little more warning.
No. When I get back, it's going to be on, right, Chris? Is it going to be Wings November? Is that what we're thinking? Or are you out of town again?
Oh, I like that idea. No, I'm in town a lot of November, so
Right.
in the beginning. So yeah. So let's jump in. There is something that we didn't talk about in a previous show that I wanted to come back to, which is wireless. And we talk a lot about wireless and fiber, and I feel like we do a good job of not getting too crazy about going overboard. But I did want to really nail down this thing that happened where Tarana released and a bunch of news outlets ran stories about how they have wireless links that are more than a gigabit now. And I sent it to Travis and I was like, why do we need fiber? And Travis went and checked with Tarana, and their engineers, I feel like, were telling a different story than their marketing people were. So I just want to get a quick recap of that from Travis.
Yeah, so I guess I'll sum it up this way. Not today. And I think the question is, as I'm learning more about their platform, the Gen 1 radios that we have, I'm not sure if they ever will in Gen 2. But the testing was reasonable. I'll give them kudos for their noise mitigation, but otherwise it's wireless. It's not like it's some magic new thing that I feel like we've been having this conversation for 15 years. I remember when I first met Doug, we were talking about this greatest wireless mesh product on planet Earth, and this is just a new iteration of the greatest wireless product on Earth that is not fiber or cable or anything. But that being said, I am currently being serviced by the finest wireless product on Earth, just by the way. So that's and that is not a Tarvana or a Ubiquiti or a Cambium product.
It is, in fact, orbiting 400 miles over your head.
And it is spectacular. And it has gotten so much better since last year. I can't even begin. It's quite amazing. Honestly, it's the finest piece of wireless technology.
Okay, well, I want to come back to Tarana and that wireless in a second, but let's just make that clear. So speed tests have suggested that Starlink has gotten worse, but you are saying your experience is much improved.
Well, but I don't live and die by the speed tests. I live and die by the user experience. And, and we'll see through this conversation here how much latency and jitter there is. But so far in the week I've been gone, it's been a fabulous experience. Your
connection is great. I mean, it looks nothing like when you're on LTE.
Yeah, no, I mean, but I don't sit there and do speed tests. And I do have a latency and jitter monitor happening kind of in real time here. Yes, I am a nerd. And there is some, as it switches satellites, you can see it happen. But the user experience is exceptional.
You're the only person I hear say this, though, Travis. Like, you're the
I just see it like I see it. Now, I wonder, and which brings us to our picture today.
Indiana.
if
Wide open.
Where I'm at or how the dish is mounted. And no different than our Tarana experience. There's no trees here. I'm in the middle of a cornfield, so I have very good view of the tower. The tower just happens to be up there instead of over there. I will give all the wireless technologies out there, Ubiquiti, Cambium, Tarana. If you've got line of sight of the tower, it's a good experience. Problem is in most areas, there's too many trees. So if you look at this picture, this is the top of my camper here. The top white little box there is the Starlink antenna. So it is high off the ground. It has clear line of sight of the towers. Experience is amazing. But
right, and I think that's the difference because I work all over the country and I talk to folks who have it, and I have a friend who has it here in Western North Carolina. He lives in the woods. It's horrible.
Oh, it'll be terrible in the woods.
He's giving it back. And then I have folks in New Mexico using it, and they feel like they're wide open, but there's a giant mountain on one side of them.
Yep.
It blocks half of the sky. And so I think that, maybe the national speed test dropping are from all those folks being connected. It may not be the actual connections, but worldwide they're saying the speeds are getting slower. So there's also a possibility that they're just loading the network up more.
Yeah.
It's a really mysterious thing, but
the more
you're in like ground zero perfect reception area.
Right. But I think an important part is that if you go from 100 megabits to 80 megabits, it goes from being obscenely amazing compared to all the alternatives to just amazing compared to all the alternatives. Right.
Right. but it does have low latency when it's out in the open, as Travis is saying. So, it's the same kind. Are you seeing the same kind of latency? It's like 20 megaseconds or
I've seen
milliseconds.
about 50 on average. I would
Well,
say.
that's higher than they're claiming. So
Yeah.
they're claiming cable latency, but that's not. Yeah.
Oh, by no means is this a proper fiber connection. And if there was a tree here, I purposely have to find places to park that have no trees. If there's a tree here, it's all game over. But again, no different than any of the wireless technologies. If you're sitting in the middle of a forest, your service is going to be
but that's
marginal at best.
And that's where I feel like the last thing I want to say on this before we get to the next topic is that a lot of this suffers from generality, which is to say people will say like wireless solves all these problems. And like, yes, there are solutions for line of sight and there are solutions, for people that are far away from the tower. And there are super fast solutions, but there's no solution that does all of those things. And these things sort of get lumped together when people talk about them. And you get this sense of like, oh, well, wireless is now doing gigabit. Okay, under what circumstances? Because you're not doing gigabit under all those things I just listed, and you're not going to anytime soon, from what we can tell, is what I'm hearing.
But the thing I love about Starlink, and I've seen it over and over, it's forcing the ILX to compete because they haven't had to compete before, and they're forcing to up their game to be in this space still. So you've got to give it to Starlink on that front.
Absolutely. So let's end it there, and let's focus on what is behind Kim's left shoulder.
I don't know. What is behind?
Is that? Do you have like a? Is that a? I thought it was a display, but I guess it's just I'm seeing a reflection on. You have like a artwork.
Yeah, it's a mermaid.
Oh, cool.
It's a mermaid tail. That's all we see is the tail.
Yeah.
Travis is really jonesing now to see the top half of the mermaid.
There you go.
Fancy.
Very cool. Next topic is redlining again. It was kind of serendipitous reports. 2 independent reports that were not aware of each other came out in the past week. The markup came out this week with a massive study of over 800,000 addresses. And last week on Thursday, the LA Times wrote about a great report from Digital Equity LA, which is a coalition that my organization has been involved in helping. And found that this is not shocking to any of us, and probably not any of our listeners, but also has been getting dramatic reviews in headlines that people pay a lot more than other people for significantly different connections. So like you have often, particularly, I think what's interesting is studies that have shown conclusively that communities with less money pay more for crappier connections than places that have better connections and more money, which seems unfair to a lot of people.
Well, and it goes back to 2 things. One is the ISPs publish their prices, but that's not how the real world works.
Except for some ISPs.
Charter, and all well, yes, but the big guys we're talking about, they will make special deals with folks, and they tend to make special deals with folks in the richer neighborhoods. It's the fact of life, because those are the folks that call up and ask for it. And they may not be so forthcoming to give you that if you're in a lower income neighborhood. And then, so the second issue is the literal difference. And I see that all over the place. We see cable networks that have very, half the speeds in poor neighborhoods as good neighborhoods. And it's because they don't fix the problems. Problems develop in cable networks. Every time there's a storm and a pole's knocked down, every time, water gets into them, it's over the years, it gets worse and worse. And if you don't keep up with the maintenance, some neighborhoods do much worse than others. And so we see that. We see speed tests where it's like 3/4 of the city is amazing. The other quarter is horrible. It's like, and it's a street by street thing. You literally can be a block away, a very different speed thing.
Yeah, no,
Travis sees this all the time. So.
I've mentioned this before. In St. Paul, I used to live in an apartment, and there was a month or 2 where we would have these outages for a few hours at a time, and it was infuriating. And one day I was coming back to the apartment, and there was a Comcast tech on a ladder on the side of my building, which was just a small 4-unit building. And I was like, what you doing? And he says, we've been tracking this problem for the past 2 months, where like it goes out and it's out, and we try to figure out where the problem is, and then it goes back on before we can isolate it. And he's like, we finally tracked it down, and it was actually like something on the unit on my house was messing up the entire loop on my building, was messing up the entire loop apparently. And it, like, maybe it was when the wind was blowing right, or the moisture content was right or something. And it was this thing where, like, they were legitimately on it trying to find it, but like when it's this intermittent failure, they could not track it down because it would be intermittent too short a time for them to zero in on it apparently.
That gives them a lot of credit, because a lot of times there's whole neighborhoods they don't seem to fix for years and years and years. But I'm glad they fixed your building.
I have a question for you guys. Do you think that it's the squeaky wheel? Like, the people who are more in the affluent areas are more likely to complain, so they get it fixed? And do you think if the people
Some of that, I think it's
some of that.
competition. I mean, I'm curious, but this is
It's all those things. It's competition. It's squeaky wheel. It's these folks who just call more. It's not even squeaky wheel. It's the folks who buy all the extra products.
right, but
You
it's
go to
also
a neighborhood and the average bill's $220 versus the other neighborhood where the average is $120. It's a very
or higher market penetration in those areas.
right.
I mean, like the Hope neighborhood of Detroit, where they were out for 45 days on an AT&T connection, right? That's never going to happen in like Beverly Hills. No, it's not. It's unimaginable, right? They would literally have rebuilt the network in that time if they had to.
Right. They would have strung fiber. Yeah.
You can respond to hurricane damage faster than that.
Chris, they were accidentally bribing people. They were
Accidentally, yes.
Accidentally.
I hate it when my wallet falls out right in front of the regulator when I trip. It's just awful. Travis, do you have any thoughts on these two reports regarding?
I got the email and I read through them, and I guess problem for me is my perspective is so small from our area, and I guess I'm not familiar with pricing varying that much around the Twin Cities unless you are. So I'm just.
Oh no, I mean, so like when I got my gigabit connection from Comcast 2 years ago, I called them up and I was like trying to figure out, like what I was going to do. And they were going to give me something for like $80 a month. That was like the blast plan or something like that. And I was like, well, what are you charging for the gigabit? And he says, oh, you know what? We have a promotion right now. You've been a customer for like this many years. And so we can do a year of gigabit at $70 a month. And I was like, well, yeah, I'll take the slower price for the faster speeds. Thank you. But like my neighbors aren't getting that. Right. And like, who knows why they even gave that to me? Like, I don't think anyone understands their
probably
pricing. At least
called. I mean, I'm a classic example. I could have called to save $15. I didn't do it for 3 years because I just didn't want to deal with sitting on hold and trying to get somebody on the other end that was competent to do it. And God forbid they change something in the system and knock my whole connection out. It just wasn't worth the $15 to me. But I guess the moral of the story of what I'm hearing is if you're going to compete with these large providers, be very clear on your pricing and your promotion and have it be universal across everybody. That's always been our approach. Now we get accused.
I want to notice there that Chris, they offered you 80. You had to ask to get the 70.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right, but there's been times where I've asked and they're like, nope. I mean, and that's always this awkward point. Like, I don't like being told no, like, and then I felt like, like, I'm like, oh, I hate going to the haggling mode. It's not my thing. My colleagues sometimes, whenever there's haggling we have to do as an office, like I pass it over to John. It's his issue. Travis, your video froze there a little bit, just so you know, your audio's been great.
Okay.
There is one interesting characteristic of cable companies we can't forget about. Cable companies don't have national policies. They have city policies and regional policies because every local manager decides on the specials. He decides on all these issues. And that's why you have such a different experience from LA to Chicago to Denver to wherever, because they are aiming towards maximizing their bonuses. And so everything is aimed towards that. And you get a very, very different experience. In some cities, it's horrible. Other cities, they really climb over you to get you to do stuff. So, and so we forget that it's not the same company everywhere. They are absolutely a company run by silos. All the big cable companies are. So,
yeah, I've seen specials come in when we've gone into areas that match our speeds and price in specific neighborhoods. But I am surprised you haven't, Travis. But second, I wanted to say, Chris, maybe they gave you the special because they watched Connect This. Or, you're a big celebrity.
The special was before I was internet famous because of this show.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
Well, now they're going to offer them $90.
I'm paying 100 now. So I mean, like, I was worried I was going to be 120, and then they said 100 if I went with paperless building. I was like, cool, and I still get a bill in the mail, and they're like, you want to do paperless? And I'm like, I'm not answering your questions anymore. Like, I just don't care. But I'll talk to you in December again, because in another month or two the contract is up. Kim, I'm curious. One of the things that I found really interesting, and we talked about this, I think perhaps in the last show, briefly. One of the findings that shocked me, and you've worked in so many different cities and at least evaluated so many different cities. I'm curious. Charter Spectrum is like the provider to like 97% of Los Angeles County.
Mhm.
AT&T is only like 30%. Most of it's crap DSL. They don't offer like fast DSL or fiber to like even a majority of the region. No, and like Frontier is at 20% or something like that. Like Charter is more of a monopoly in LA County than I would have expected.
Mhm. That doesn't surprise me at all. I think AT&T has a bigger name, but they do not have fiber service as much as some of these other guys. I mean, Frontier right now is making a huge push with fiber, and they have been for a while. I think they just are making more noise about it right now because they understood that their technology was going away. But yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. From what I'm seeing, it's interesting that you see a lot of communities say they have fiber, but it's only in the new developments. It's only in the open trenches when they get in there, not into the brownfields at all. So when you go into new cities and they say, "Oh, we have a fiber offering," go into the neighborhood that's been there for 20 years. I can guarantee you that neighborhood doesn't have a fiber offering.
And you also have to go back 100 years because, Pacific Bell, which was the old AT&T, didn't claim all of LA. Way back when they put out the franchises, they were only in the core of what was considered city 100 years ago. So all those outer suburbs were never claimed by them. And they went to people like Frontier, which was Verizon. So it was, or General Tel in those days. So they just they don't even cover nearly as much of an area there just because that's the old history. So the map of the telephone companies in LA is very interesting. They are not in nearly as many places as these places now, there's towns of 500,000 people and they're not there. So,
well, one of the other things that I still found interesting was that there are, obviously race and income are highly correlated in a lot of places where the low income communities often have a greater number of Black and Hispanic and other people of color. And one of the things that they found was in areas where you have a thriving Black middle class, they were also paying more than areas where you have a strong white neighborhood. And that, I would not, it's not too surprising, but I wouldn't have expected it necessarily if I had to put money on it.
I want to understand their marketing practices. I just want to understand the logic that goes behind when they're making decisions, because you can't be in a room and say these things and then go into this neighborhood and charge it in our environment we are in today. So what is happening behind those closed doors? Or are they just not reevaluating the market conditions in those areas and not reevaluating the pricing structure? I don't know.
Yeah, that's good marketing insight. I have no idea how any of that works, Kim.
Both. I mean, you have to think that in these regional meetings where they set their rate policies, race and all that's probably part of the discussion behind the closed doors. You have to, when you see the results, you got to think that's at least part of it.
But don't you think
it may not be, but it's just so odd.
Yeah, I mean, in our culture right now, I feel like somebody would be a whistleblower if those
You would
conversations
think.
were really happening.
Yeah.
But
at the end of the day, redlining is redlining when it actually happens. And so it's like, it's still redlining. It's just, if it's not intentional, how the heck is it happening? It's a big mystery. I mean, you're right.
Yeah. Maybe they'll invite me to one of those meetings since they bribed me.
Oh.
So yesterday, then, as a result of this report, someone said that Travis had a history of redlining, to which I then, they said USI. And they actually said USI Wireless, which covers the entire city. It is fiber that has been being built out. And I think, Travis, people are mad at you that you didn't build the entire city 5 years ago. So I don't know why you didn't build the entire city 5 years ago, but apparently you should have.
I actually was getting it was a little disappointing. It had been a little bit since we had a redlining, conversation again. So apparently the red line moves wherever, that particular activist wants it to be. So I don't give it much credit anymore. There's just the problem with everybody is, and, Kim and Doug understand this. They don't understand the reality of constructing these networks. You know, it's a long, laborious process, especially in an area like we are, where you can only construct from April to December. It is what it is. You know,
So in this case, it was by a person that has like a history, I think, of being really thoughtful. And so I wrote back and criticized him in strong terms. We went back and forth a number of times. I'm digging out the thread, putting it in the chat here. But I would just say that this was a good conversation in which I responded in kind of the way that Travis just did. Like I think is important to note, like, the difference between having not yet built areas is different from having passed them by, or Travis builds a certain amount per year based on the maximum amount he has available, and like you can't build the entire city. And not only that, but when you start with a certain amount of money, like you have to your first place. I mean, because someone was like, well, he could have started in like a low income area, and I'm sort of like, well, yeah, but like then he wouldn't have a network because there's business realities.
Yeah, but people don't understand how business works. I mean,
no, that's true. And
so I always offer, and I offer this to anybody that wants to have a conversation. I'm happy to sit down over a cup of coffee and go through it on a piece of paper with people. I have yet to have anyone take me up on it.
So the people that were in this call that I made that offer, and they said, they were basically like, no, I think you did a pretty good job of explaining what was going on. And, and it's one of those things that, like, this is the problem really, I think, is people want to show that they are aware of the injustice of our system, and they sometimes will just cast off those sorts of claims without actually understanding whether or not that is the case in a specific instance. It is true that these neighborhoods are often left behind. It is not true in this case that USI Fiber is leaving them behind, in my opinion. Like
but it's funny that they weren't focusing on AT&T or somebody.
Well, my answer is always like, why are you asking the city? Like, the city and the county have a responsibility to serving everyone that is in their political boundary, and they have done nothing. And I literally, I asked people, and some people that I think aren't always predisposed to agree with me, I was like, would we be better off if USI Fiber was only in the suburbs and they ignored all of Minneapolis? No. And like a private company that's building in these areas, like, they're going to do what they're going to do. Travis has more of a commitment to serving all of Minneapolis than most places would. And I just feel like people don't expect enough of local government anymore. They don't vote in the elections. They're just, their taxes going up, and they get frustrated and they're not engaged. And like, it lets local governments off the hook for not doing a better job.
I just get so frustrated when they attack people like Travis, because it's not fair for people who are still constructing, building a world-class network that is scalable, and it's not old technology, but they're going after for this one piece of information that they don't understand. And there is not unlimited amount of money that's out there that Travis can build forever for. There is business implications, but it's easy to sit behind a keyboard and criticize others without understanding, and that frustrates the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I always offer, here, you want to help put in some cash, or here's a shovel, you can help dig, or nobody wants to do anything. And you know what? They only criticize. The irony of the whole thing, they criticize until the day you hook them up, and then you never hear from them again.
Well, that was the thing, right? I did look up. It was 5 years since Powderhorn was proof that you did not like black people or low-income folks or whatever. And then you connected Powderhorn, and now it's a different neighborhood that's proof that you don't want to connect low-income neighborhoods.
You just move around, and there's, I don't even really give it much attention anymore. If somebody wants to sit down and have a real honest to God business conversation and talk about the realities of building a network, especially in an urban center, I'm happy to have it, but I'm not going to sit and argue with them over a keyboard.
No, what's interesting is I was talking with a reporter from Minneapolis about the markup report, and they were making the point that Minneapolis, or that North Minneapolis, which is an area that I think Travis is going to have difficulty making the numbers work anytime soon. It's a low-income area, a lot of crime. It is an area of town that has been very neglected. That area has not really been redlined by CenturyLink in the way that other neighborhoods were. And so I think it's worth noting that there are a lot of different variables that go into these things. And it is not just one or two causes. There's hundreds of variables, and 10 of them might be at play in any given place. Doug, it looked like you were either agreeing or
Well,
disagreeing.
yeah, I agree because it depends on the ISP. You know, Verizon built their FiOS network completely using cost per passing. They didn't care what the neighborhoods were. They built through some poor neighborhoods, and they bypassed places like, you know, Potomac, Maryland, which where all the really rich people in DC live, and they still aren't there. And so, but there's places up where I lived where there were just very, very poor neighborhoods because they overlashed, and they literally made an engineering decision. And it's very easy to criticize them for missing places, but they would go, the costs were too high in that neighborhood, and so they did not redline. Now what they have is a hodgepodge of a network that makes no sense.
Well, I mean,
it's block by block by block, and it's crazy.
but I'm not sure when you say
actually
they didn't.
block it.
I
Yeah.
mean, I don't like the term redlining because and I've said before, like redlining is something that was a really heinous, very deliberate practice that that just because something ends up in a similar way with leaving people behind does not mean that there's a red line on a map. But Verizon did pick suburbs and generally go to them and ignore the cores of Baltimore, for instance, and other places where they probably had a low cost per passing.
And that they very well may have done. So yes.
But we ran the numbers on Baltimore's Verizon, and I don't know.
Passing included getting into the buildings, which in apartment buildings can be, especially 20 years ago, was really expensive. The technology is so much better today.
We did an initial analysis that we did not go deep on to get a sense of FiOS and the dynamics around it. The Verizon fiber to the home product, and found that, you know, they're mostly in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast areas, and the areas that they had passed with FiOS tended to be more diverse, with a greater number of Black neighborhoods and Hispanic populations than their DSL service territory, which is in our mind was a sign that probably that there was a big density issue that was at work. You know, they were passing a lot of suburbs that had a lot of Black people, and the rural areas did not have very many. And so if you actually wanted to do a simplistic analysis, you would see that Verizon was reverse discriminating in some ways, which obviously is not the case.
Yeah, I mean, they started in Prince George's County, which is the largest, you know, Black county, the second being Atlanta area, and that's where they built a ton of it. It would look like reverse discrimination. So, but again, my point to them was they strictly, because I went and met with all the engineers because I was working for cities who were trying to lure them there, and they're going, it's cost. That's all they cared about. So, but that's not how a lot of other ISPs do it. So.
Right. The last piece of this I just want to say is I feel like Travis, you do this uniform pricing, and have you ever had your marketing people look at what if we charge different people different prices and tried to make more money that way?
No, I mean, remember our whole motto is, you know, unbelievably simple internet, and that's just too complicated and too confusing. I want to have synergy, basically gigabit symmetrical minimum and the same price everywhere. If we can't do those two things, we're not going there. And there's been buildings, right, that we have purposely not gone into because we can't provide those two things. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not going to go into a building and use DSL or some other, you know, DOCSIS in the building. If we can't run proper fiber or Cat 6 to a unit, we're not going to do the building. So I guess maybe we are redlining. We're technologically redlining because we want to provide the same exact service everywhere. And if we can't, I don't want to provide a second class service.
Well, I think that goes into your brand, Travis. If you're providing something like in one area and it's not the same in another experience, that ruins the customer experience and how they go out there with your brand and present it. So yeah, no, that's a very big marketing thing.
Yeah, and Kim knows.
You would need twice as many customer service reps because if you had different prices, people would be calling constantly and begging for specials. You don't have any of them.
Oh, can you imagine just the amount of phone calls and the frustration? I mean, and then all of a sudden now you're just like everybody else. I mean, it's just
that's so smart. I mean, this gets down to AT&T's share price is down, and AT&T has made so many. Their management has made so many terrible investment decisions. You kind of wonder, like, would the cable companies actually be more profitable if they just went to a simple pricing mechanism and then were able to significantly reduce their CSR staff and just focus on what matters?
They would be. I think I was laughing the other night because I was talking about something of customer experience and marketing and what that means, because I talk to people around the country on a daily basis, and people kind of discount what I'm saying of how the importance of these small little aspects. And then they don't listen to me. And then in 2 months, they give me a call and go, "Oh crap, you were right." And I'm like, duh.
I also hate it when you're right, Kim.
I do too. All my staff does as well, and they like to tell me about it.
Well, I have a question.
I preach simplicity. I preach Travis's plan. That's the one.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, when has anyone on this call ever called the water company?
We did because recently we got an ungodly large bill, and it turns out that they were putting in smart water here, and they hadn't billed us for like 15 months. And we didn't notice it because it's also bundled with trash.
Okay.
So all of a sudden they built us, and we're like, oh my heavens, because we're also rehabbing our house. It's like, do we have water running into the ground? But that's the only time I think in my lifetime I've called.
I'm in your lifetime you've called
That
once.
was it.
And here Chris is talking like, my contract's coming up in another month. I got to call him again and argue.
Right.
No, just be the water company.
Right.
You know, that's all you got to be.
But I wonder how much of it, and Kim might know this, how much of this is also like managers and middle managers in the division having to justify their jobs in expanding their departments?
Don't worry.
Well, if you have one simple price, you don't need a big marketing department at all.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's a negative from the perspective of a bunch of managers and middle managers.
But I think that that's going to change, like, especially here at Team Utopia, as you're seeing the price structure go up. So can you justify what people are paying in these older areas versus what they might be paying with inflation and construction costs going up? So even though we might not want to do it, we might be forced to do it to some degree in some new areas with keeping the price in the same in the older areas.
But that's different from running a ton of promos and weird gotcha things. And
I don't have time for that. I barely can handle what I have on my plate today. Why would I want to be like, well, we need to call them in 3 months and tell them their price is going up, or try to figure out the billing? Just even imagine the billing department trying to figure out what's happening in those scenarios. It would be impossible.
So let's do a quick segue here to how many people are you billing, Kim?
Big news here at Team Utopia. I just saw it come up through on our Slack channel. We have officially hit over 50,000 customers at UTOPIA Fiber.
Nice.
So we are super excited and growing very rapidly. When I came to Utopia in 2010, we were probably about 10,000 customers. So we have kept growing, and the speed keeps going up and up. So 100,000 customers. Let's see how long it takes us to get there. So
also, if Mike Williams or anyone else from Utopia, I think you should unsubscribe quick and then resubscribe and see if you could be one of the 50,000th customers.
do not try that trick at home.
Wait, they're going to give them a T-shirt, right?
I think they're going to T-shirt. No, I'm going to go back to my first customer and see who's been on the network the longest, and then give them a T-shirt for hanging with us.
Oh, that's a great idea.
That's actually, you should try to find that out. Yeah.
Well, I know so I drive by it all the time. So.
Starry, a company we've talked about a bit before, a company that is one that I still find puzzling, but as Doug will probably note in our conversation, is run by an engineering genius, has basically said it's not going to do RDOF after all, which is really horrifying in some ways, but I guess I would say, is it? I feel like this is going to be an interesting story to talk about. But RDOF has said it's not. Starry said they're not doing RDOF. So, Doug, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Well, this is a preview because I believe this is my blog tomorrow. So I write them a week ahead of time. So, they won't tell. They didn't tell the FCC why they rejected it, and so they're not required to, and so they just have to pay a fine. And so the speculate, and they were. They were asked by a ton of reporters, and they just won't say. There's a lot of speculation that they don't have money to build it, because in the last quarter they lost $30 million and they spent $20 more million on capital. I mean, a burn rate of $50 million a quarter is pretty ugly, and so they might not be able to afford the RDOF. There's also the question. We already started the conversation half an hour ago. They do a mesh network. This is not the big tower. You get to one person's house, it bounces to the next house, to the next house, to the next house. And they're doing this in the Columbus, Ohio metro, and it works pretty good when the houses are close together. But out in the rural areas, if you can't see your neighbor, how can you make a mesh network work? So they may have decided that they weren't actually able to deliver the speeds they promised, because the guy who runs Starry is quite ethical. I mean, he is not your typical ISP. He's very much like Travis. He's a very ethical guy. His philosophy is affordable, simple. I mean, all the same stuff. So he may have backed out because of technology, and we'll probably never know. But you know, one of those two reasons did it. But they, you know, the cost issue. You got to remember that all this inflation that Travis is always talking about. Whatever they thought they were bidding on, the cost has gone up, what, 30 or 40% in these rural areas. So they might have just looked at the math and said, "Oh my gosh, what did we win here in this auction?"
Yeah, but I think that's the point I want to make is this even surprising? Even if this is not a technology conversation, it's just a finance conversation of RDOF came out at this specific time, and then the whole market changed right after.
Everyone who won RDOF is looking at much higher cost to build than they thought. So that's a really big question. I mean, Charter's one of the big winners. Their cost just probably went up by, you know, $100 million. That's a lot.
I'm not hearing that from the co-ops. John Chambers, I asked him because I was looking at an area in which they had costed it out 2 years ago, and I said, "What are your new costs?" And he said, "Pretty similar. We're still building at pretty much the previous rates, and maybe it's just an issue of scale. If you're building that much and you've locked down enough ahead of time."
Well, now he is a little different because he has a lot of his own staff and a lot of lockdown subcontractors. The guys who don't have that are paying a lot more.
Hmm.
And that's the cost.
Another thing to consider is I'm wondering whether they looked at this and they were like, "We're going to get, you know, like some small amount over 10 years for RDOF, or we let this go back into the pool and, you know, like bid. I know they won in California and a bunch of other states. Maybe we'll get BEAD money, which will be better and more favorable for us to come build then. And even after paying the penalty, it would be worth it."
I asked you guys this months and months ago, and I said, if they turn in RDOF, would they be eligible for BEAD money? And you guys,
and the answer is no. You can't double dip on federal money.
Yeah.
But if you turn down RDOF, then you're not double dipping, right?
Yeah, except that no grant office will now give it to them because they are now rejectors and losers. State grant offices will never give Starry a grant after they just walked away. So.
Okay, I'm just going to say that I would not use the term never. You know,
from
what I've seen of states are giving Frontier money. That is insane.
But you know, Frontier is building fiber and actually getting pretty rave reviews on it.
And Frontier has a history of failing at everything it does.
Well, I know.
Hey, just look at Utopia. We turn that around. Nothing is impossible.
You have an incentive to do it, whereas I'm not gonna. My parents were Frontier customers, and it was horrifying and scarring to have been stuck with it.
I have a lot of relatives who work for Frontier, so I mean, I hear all the inside scoop. It's not a pretty company to work for.
Do they know that you're out there criticizing them, Doug, as they work?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they do.
They're probably cheering Doug on.
The public relations folks of all the carriers read my blog, and I think they write down, "Let's get that SOB." I don't know.
So this is going to be like
he lives in California. He just doesn't want anybody to know where he lives.
This is the next great Hollywood blockbuster, the Knives Out version of Doug Dawson's unexpected death, and everyone has a motive to have taken him out.
Quick story. Years ago, I was testifying in 4 or 5 different cases at the same time against Verizon. And the Verizon lawyer sent in my office a giant box of chocolates. Nobody on the staff would eat them. They're going, "We know these are poisoned." So.
Oh, that's great.
Their lawyers are actually nice folks. Very nice gesture. But yes, we thought that was hilarious. So.
That's great. I get nervous every time I see that Comcast is increasing speeds for people because I assume that means my bill's increasing 2 months later. Doug,
it's time for the annual rate increase. You know, last time they raised the rates, their base rate's now $80, and they didn't make. When they raised their rates last year, they were very sneaky for the first time. They didn't say how much it went up. So normally they come out and they go, rates are going from this to this, right? Well, the base rate went up to $80 from 76, but they never said that. So you find out the hard way, you know, now it's on their website. So finally it shows up, but this is almost like 9 months after the rate increase. So they're getting sneakier with how they're doing it. So yeah, it's time for another one. They're going to do it. So
But I think we're expecting that we might not see as much of one. I mean, there's this question of like their costs have legitimately gone up, but they're losing customers. So
yeah, but when they raise rates $1, that dollar goes 100% to the bottom line. That's just the only way to keep their stock price running is to keep raising rates. I mean, they're in a bind unless they wanted the stock to go to hell.
yeah, they don't want to be AT&T.
No.
All right. So, Travis, were you going to jump in there?
Well, I've just noticed everyone's starting to move their pricing up. Even people that used to have price for life, those type of things no longer exist. And the same service today is $5 or $10 more than it was a year ago. But rightfully, I don't know how it wouldn't be. I'm still 100% convinced that Doug Dawson is 100% correct that there will be $100 internet here is what you're going to pay in the not too distant future.
I love the story from Nevada where CenturyLink started billing, broadband for life prices more money.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. How can you have broadband for life and then the prices go up? I mean,
The marketing people moved
they're not
on.
supposed to go up forever, but the new marketing people said, screw those old deals. And so they raised their rates anyway. There was a big old stink.
I need to talk to some of these marketing people. Making me look bad.
I think if you look in the fine print, it literally says kinda sorta.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure it did when they agreed. A lot of them never actually got it in writing. So it was just someone on
Foolish.
the phone.
So I mean, the ultimate question is going to be, what is low cost internet? We talk about that all the time. I think those of us who've been around forever are like, 1995, where we started selling internet back in 1995. But with the way prices are going and the way capital costs are going and the way labor costs are going, I don't be surprised if we're not having a conversation by episode 150 of $99.99 for internet.
Oh, I think it's gonna be before episode 150, but we'll end this discussion with just me, because I feel like on a previous show, I had reported that I had read someone saying that inflation was transitory, and I just saw another headline from some prominent economist, which, let's just say, I'm saying as a joke, because you could find a headline from prominent economists saying everything,
Right.
but saying that inflation will be down to 3% next year, and the Fed is going to kill us with the rate hikes being too fast. So I don't think anyone has a sense of where we're going to be next year, but I would expect the prices are going to be going up faster. Oh, here we go again.
I mean, you can count on 100 basis points here, 75 coming up in November, and another 25 right after that. So, and that just destroys it. I mean, like I told you, we're going to slow down our build for next year, just purely based off cost.
Just as you're approaching my house, it's a freaking asymptote. I can tell.
So
it's redlining against Chris.
Yeah, I guess we're greenlining because of it's all going back into interest rates instead of more fiber in the ground. So
Good line.
Let's bring Dustin in. Dustin is a long-term friend who's been doing great work in this space, and has particularly been, well, Dustin's doing a lot of things right now. I don't know what your home life is like, Dustin, but like you're doing a lot. And one of the things that you're doing is focused on this, I would say, atrocious contract with the FCC has with CostQuest to build the broadband fabric. And I wish that we knew more about about how bad it is, but we haven't even seen the contract yet, is my understanding. Why don't you just sort of give us a little background on what's going on here?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's an honor to be on macroeconomics with Chris. So yeah, the contract that the FCC has with CostQuest to build the fabric of the broadband serviceable locations, which is essentially the base layer of the map that will be used for ISPs and others to report where service is reported to be available, and made available in the broadband availability maps that the FCC will be releasing hopefully within the next month or so. A big part of the problem, we don't have time to get into all of the issues that are surrounding this process, but one of them is that this contract allows CostQuest to take this data set and have proprietary control over the entire data set, despite the fact that public funds are being used to build the data set. And this creates all sorts of problems. It makes access to the fabric very difficult. There are some local governments that I've been working with that have been trying for months to get access to the fabric, but because it's under such a tight lock and key, they haven't been able to do so, and they've already expended considerable resources just trying to access it alone, let alone once they actually get it, figuring out how to use it and how to apply it to how to analyze it and correct the data. So there's the access issue, and then because it's so heavily restricted, it's restricted in how it can actually be used as well. So the license agreements that providers and governmental entities, who are the only ones that really have access at this point, need to enter into to get those license agreements, are restricted to purposes related to the broadband data collection program. So they can submit data, which the providers are mandated to do by law, and they can challenge to correct the BSL fabric. And so essentially what we have here is this proprietary data set, which the broadband availability maps will be built on top of, in which ISPs are mandated to build for them by providing their data and putting thousands of hours of resources across the country into collecting, compiling, and submitting this data, which CostQuest retains control over. And then if a state or local government wants the fabric to accurately reflect their reality, then they have to put their local resources, more public funds from a lot of local governments that have limited resources, to correct and build CostQuest data set for them. There was an analogy that I heard the other week. CostQuest rolls into your garage with a tire and a tailpipe, and they're driving out with a Porsche, but you don't get to use that Porsche.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, this could. I'm not a lawyer, and I hope lawyers aren't going to spit up when I say this, but like, this number of states have specific restrictions from using public resources to further private companies. And this seems to be like violating the spirit of that in terms of using a bunch of public resources to improve a proprietary data set in this way. Doug, I want to come to you first to see if you want to add on or ask any questions about that.
No, I mean, he's summarized it really well. On top of that, we know a little bit about how they built this fabric in the first place, and they were given a very short time frame, to be honest. What they're trying to do with the fabric is to show every single location that can get broadband in the United States and update it every year. I mean, the Census Bureau would have said, "Are you guys insane? It's not ever going to be achievable." I mean, it's just, and you can't do it. When you go to a farm and there's 9 buildings and people live in 2 of them, how do they know which 2 they live in? You just can't get there with any of the tools that they have at their disposal. And yet they're pretending like this thing is accurate, and it's just way off by definition if you just look at how they gathered the data. And I don't think that it's ever achievable, but I guarantee you what it means is we'll keep putting more and more millions into giving to them so they can keep making it supposedly better. So it was a bad idea to start with. This was not the way to go.
And I think some people get defensive about CostQuest because I feel like this is not a criticism entirely of CostQuest, like maybe around the edges.
No, the FCC invented this.
The FCC screwed this up big time, right? The FCC has known for 15 years or more, and public interest groups have been hounding them that they needed to have an accurate broadband data source, which would require, if you're going to do it, this sort of thing. And they waited and they waited and they didn't do anything. And then at the last second, they said, we're going to issue this almost impossible contract. And then they somehow made it proprietary, when my understanding is that wasn't even contemplated in the original idea. And now CostQuest is kind of taking advantage of that, is what it looks like. Because NTIA, one of the reasons we're talking about this is yesterday NTIA announced it was about to shovel $50 million of our taxpayer dollars at CostQuest to have access to this proprietary data as well, for a number of reasons. And I'm so frustrated. But Dustin, I'm gonna come back to you because I know you've specifically looked at how we got here, and I'm curious if you can summarize quickly, like sort of like where did we go wrong, and is this entirely just the FCC screwing up over and over again?
Yeah, Chris, if it's all right, I might focus a little more on where we can go from here, because, like you said, there's $50 million about to be awarded to CostQuest to basically take what they've already been paid to develop for the FCC and provide it to the NTIA. I've read through the list of uses that the NTIA has in mind with this contract, and I'm having a hard time discerning significant differences in what's provided beyond what's already been built and provided in the BDC maps, or the broadband data collection maps. And so one of my concerns here, and there's an excerpt here that is really worth highlighting. It says that the fabric, which CostQuest licenses to the FCC, serves as the basis for the FCC's BDC effort. For parties to use this BDC information at the standard location level, they must license CostQuest's fabric. So to use the availability data of the public maps, you will have to license CostQuest fabric. So we shouldn't be viewing these as like our national maps. These aren't our national maps. These are CostQuest's maps. And what I would like to see is some proactive movement by states and others to start developing maps that can actually be used to track this in the moment outside of this process, that in a way that allows us to gather longitudinal data and track progress over the years to come. This is not a 3-year problem. If we stop mapping this once the BEAD program's implemented, then we're just going to find ourselves in the same position 20 years down the road with bad maps and the need for more funding. And so we need to start looking at this. You don't stop tracking statistics on heart failure just because there's a 5% drop in heart failure in a particular year. And if we want this data over time, we need local, state-run, open mapping processes. Otherwise, the communities that need to have this information in the states will be beholden forever to these license agreements. And again, this all
let me ask you a question about the Sean asked this question, to what extent are states required to use the FCC data? Are there things, and so the FCC data will be used to determine how much money goes to each state. After that, and Dustin, I'm guessing Doug could jump in too if you're not familiar, but since you're working with Washington, I'm guessing you're familiar with it. To what extent is Washington or other states required to use this proprietary data set after the money is distributed?
According to the NTIA folks at the top who I've talked to, states can petition to break any of the federal rules, but it doesn't mean they're going to be granted their rights. So the answer is we don't know. The state can come in and go, thank you, we have to use your fabric, but we want to use our own definition of served and unserved when we give the grants out. And so they're free to ask that. The NTIA doesn't know if they're going to be allowed to grant it. So that they know that's coming, but they're going to have to wait till someone asks for it. And so you know, because the congressional language was fairly clear, you have to use this, but it didn't say that the states have to use it. So that it's typical, you know, holes in the original legislation that leave these gaps we don't know.
Which were probably deliberate.
Bigger problem in that the rules still allow ISPs to report marketing speeds and not actual speeds. So even after all this new map, the unserved could be massively distorted by somebody claiming they're fast when they're not.
And we don't have a way of attaching pricing data to that directly, although the broadband label, if that gets done, could help there. I mean, many of us have this.
These new maps after all this are far worse than the old maps.
Dustin, how do you react to that?
Does this shock anybody? I mean, does this really shock anybody?
I'm sorry, Travis, I'm not surprised.
Hey, you lost me at $50 million. So, you know, 50 million bucks for a map, and now I got to pay a fee to use it.
50 million would build a lot of fiber, wouldn't it?
Well, it's more on the order of 100 million of total money to CostQuest for the
It's
map.
100
If NTIA's
Oh,
money goes
it
through,
gets
right?
better. So 100 million bucks, and then if I'm a state, I have to buy an annual licensing fee. You know,
I don't know that the states.
whoever owns CostQuest is a genius.
Well,
The state
I
gets it
think
for free.
so. I'll toss it back to Dustin here. I think the fact that you have to license it does not necessarily mean states would have to pay for it, or that I would have to pay for it once it's available for us to license it. We might not. I think the greater issue is that we are restricted in how we can use it, and that is even more horrifying from a public point of view in some ways. Dustin, is that right?
Yeah, so the states can access a free license if they want to help build the data set or report into the data set. However, if they want to use it for local planning purposes, they do have to license it. And we've been pretty clear about trying to ask pointed questions to say, well, what about how they implement the state challenge process, which is a required component within the BEAD NOFO. So going back to that other question, the initial determination of who's unserved and underserved will be based on the FCC's data, but each state will have to implement a challenge process. The quality of those challenge processes will be dependent on the state. It's a real shame that in order to use this for any sort of planning or purpose outside of the broadband data collection program, that it's going to require continual licenses. And it's also worth noting here that this additional 50 million coming from the NTIA presumably is coming out of the total BEAD funding, right? So that's $50 million less to connect unserved and underserved people across our country that is instead going to CostQuest to provide what they've already been paid to provide. And again, it's just like in this whole process, the burden and the impact is shifted to people that don't have access to the internet. And that gets lost in a lot of these complicated legal and procedural conversations. We're talking about people that are hurting, that need access, and there are people who aren't going to get it because of this process.
Dustin, you use logic. I think that's the problem, though, with you're using logic in your business of saying this, and that's not what the federal government does. But I do think we need to have a new segment on Connect This in which Chris criticizes the federal government programs, because I feel like it's getting more and more frequent as these programs.
There's a common link. The FCC continues to do a terrible job. The FCC is operating on a 2-2 even split with two commissioners that I think do a decent job, two commissioners that are focused solely on their future and just trying to get clicks. And Gigi Sohn would be such a tremendous addition to the FCC to like just bring some real passion and hard work to the office and seriousness that I think has been lacking at the FCC a bit. It is almost 1 year since she was put up. We still have hope that she'll be confirmed in the lame duck session. But yeah, I'm deeply, deeply frustrated with the FCC. This is just, it's so bad. And so Doug, I want to come to you. I know you had a comment, but first, Mike Conlow on Twitter has had a couple of good threads, and he keeps writing about and pushing for the need to have some open and also John Chambers has pushed for this too. States should have open and ideally correctable estimates for what they think it will cost, which is to say cost models for passing areas that will need to get service. And that's what we should be using $100 million for, to try and develop those sorts of tools that would be open to the public, not these proprietary data sets that are so restricted. Go ahead, Doug.
I want to point out something Dustin said, because I want to make sure this sinks in on folks. A state can't use this data because they do get a free license, but they can't use it to do things like publish reports in the state given to the public that talk about what the database means. They can't use it for any sort of analysis or anything outside of simply using it to try to fix the map. They can't actually do anything with it unless now they probably have to pay money if they want to do those extra things. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So.
It drives me batty though, guys, because it drives me batty because we keep going back to these private companies thinking that they're going to do the right thing. You see it here, you see it in private public partnerships that, oh, they're going to always do the right thing. They have shareholders. They have financial gains by doing this. We can't just think they're going to do the right thing for just the sake of doing the right thing.
This is a rant that we could probably put on a loop. I think I've done it at least 2 or 3 times in past shows for me where like, I liken these companies to, a tiger at the zoo. You don't say, let's do an experiment and see how the tiger does with the cage door open. Right. And if you do that and the tiger mauls people, you don't say that's a bad tiger. You say, who the hell left that cage door open? Like, we know the nature of the tiger, right? The tiger has certain incentives and millions of years of evolution to do certain things. And I mean, these companies have hundreds of years would be accurate in terms of a certain approach of maximizing profit. And they can act in predictable ways. And it is absolutely a failure of government, not a failure of these companies that they act in ways that they do. Now, that's my perspective. There's other people who would say I'm wrong. I mean, I'm not saying that like everyone would agree with me, but that's the way I look at it, and I think I'm right. Go ahead, Travis.
You're wrong.
I'm okay with that.
I agree with you this one time, Chris, and this one time alone.
Oh, hold on. Your solution is what? Have the government do it?
No, my solution is the government has to have better rules. We need to have higher standards. And actually, when these things go wrong, we don't say AT&T is a crap company. We say we need to have proper rules on AT&T. And the challenge is that it's hard to get there when they keep bribing people, allegedly.
Wait, you say that what we need is broadband regulation like we used to have instead of
not like we used to have necessarily. Absolutely.
Right now they're not regulated at all.
I mean, if you want to get into market theory, right? Like markets need rules from government. They need courts. You need to have a currency. There's a number of things that like anyone who thinks that markets can just work without government or they haven't done their history. And
monopolies need rules. Yep.
Right. Well, also markets need boundaries and rules in order to have the right amount of competition. And we don't know. I'm not saying you need to know, like in this market, we need 5, in that market, we need 10. I'm saying that 1 or 2 is generally too few and 1,000 might be too many. This is probably really leaving people behind. My point is just that I don't want to sit here and be like, CostQuest sucks. I don't think people should take that away. I don't think any of us are saying that. CostQuest is doing something that is very difficult. They're also a profit-seeking company that is rationally taking advantage of this atrocious government policy to maximize their revenues, which is what we should expect to happen.
I find it just so funny because AT&T has its maps. We all have our maps. Kim has her maps. We all know where our stuff is. You
don't all know though. I mean, let's be so like CenturyLink, Lumen, wireless companies. They don't know where a lot of their stuff is.
They know where
they don't know where the DSL is, and maybe you just want to say, okay, disregard that. But the wireless companies don't know where they can provide service, so it's more challenging than that.
I find that so surprising that you think that. Why don't the states know this stuff? If they're going to give out,
I'm with you.
They're going to give out free tax dollars, and the state has no idea where to apply it.
You got to remember that before the B grants, 2/3 of the state didn't have a broadband grant office. They don't know anything about this.
But this is why Dustin is so correct. In Dustin's point, I'll come to you in a second, Dustin. The states need to have this data, right? And so it's been 10 years since North Carolina, more than 10 years, had changed the law, Doug. One of the things that they had done was they made it so AT&T would report its UVerse service on an 11.5 sheet of paper, right? And it was like, here's where we offer UVerse. It's the state of North Carolina. And it's great. It's somewhere near Raleigh. And that was the extent of the reporting requirements. It's ridiculous. Right. And we told them that at the time and they said, that's cool, Chris, but you're annoying and we get lots of money from the other guys. So that's where it ends up. Go ahead, Dustin.
Yeah. So I completely agree. The states should have this data now and into the future so that we ensure that the work toward digital equity that we achieve over the next few years continues on, and we need good data and good maps. And it has been apparent and continues to be apparent that is not going to happen at the national level. And so states need to step up, and since they're unable to use the federally funded maps for these purposes without paying an ongoing licensing fee, it would be, in my opinion, in their interest to start developing a local open data set that's built in partnership with local entities, local industry, local experts, and local data to really inform where things are at, where they need to go, and how they get there.
I think the question is, what is stopping them? And I think your answer, Dustin, is nothing is stopping them. Like, their willingness to do it is what is lacking, and they can do this, and they should do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I'm in North Carolina, and they have no intention of doing that, right? So,
Well, I'd be curious. I mean, North Carolina state office is quite good, despite the
They are.
legislature
Oh, they
having
are.
done such a crap
But
job.
the legislature wouldn't give the money to do this. I'm not
Right.
at all faulting the
Right,
broadband.
but I think this is where it's a combination of states need to do more, and groups like ours need to keep developing tools. We're going to have to wrap this up. We're running out of time. But
You do realize, Chris, that your organization can't look at these maps at all. You have no authority.
well, we could if we're contracted with an ISP, like for instance, a
You can
tribal
look at little
ISP that needs
pieces
help.
of the maps,
Right.
but you can't
Yep.
look at the big picture to start looking for trends and things. You
Yeah,
can't do any of that analysis.
I'm pretty aware of that.
Yes.
Um,
But we do know the solution, right? I mean, we all know. Do we? You know, it's
well,
pretty,
I think this Dustin just offered one solution. What's your additional solution?
I think Kim needs to be the FCC commissioner that's missing and get.
We've already determined that.
No, I mean, I think that's really Kim's going to save this whole program.
No. I feel like if we could just get Gigi in, that would be our better option. But no, there's not. Like, Chris, do you really think that we're ever going to have national maps? I don't think.
Well, I think I would say to further what Dustin had said, if I'm talking to a state today, I'm saying the FCC is shouting at you that they are incapable of getting this right. You cannot count on them. If you care about making sure that like everyone has decent internet access, that your businesses have the environment that they need to thrive, you need to step up and create the data. You can do it. Not only that, you could do it better. You can attach pricing data to it. Like you can really improve upon anything. We're hoping that in a year we have slightly less flawed maps than we did before. And many of us don't think we're going to have that at the federal level.
But okay, but
States
Chris,
need to do it.
States, but they don't have the resources. We can't even get people in state broadband offices
States
who
States do have the resources. You don't need $100 million to do this. Like, I mean, like
Oh,
states.
hold on, Chris.
Oh.
I'll take $100 million. I'll do it.
No, I'm saying. No.
This is how corruption starts, right here.
Yeah. Where do we get this checkbook at? Yeah, I'll give you my account.
Travis was honest when we made the deal.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing to understand is states have resources, and different states have different things, right? Minnesota has $9 billion, potentially $11 or $12 billion of budget surplus. There is no reason. The reason Minnesota does not have better data is because they do not take it seriously. They just want Comcast and CenturyLink, maybe AT&T and a few others to solve this for them. They don't take it seriously. That is the issue. Not that they don't have money. The states refuse to put money. States put money into stupid things that have far less of an economic return on our lives than broadband, right? I mean, like, think of all the money they put into sports stadiums for entertainment, which is valuable. I agree. But it would be more valuable to make sure that kids have a freaking connection in their home, whether they're in rural or urban areas.
Okay, that was Chris's macroeconomic rant of the show. We're doing good here.
We don't have a problem because these states, the private sector is delivering. That's what you keep hearing. The private sector will deliver. So why would they bother doing maps when they have no problem?
I think we need that head. We need to have a permanent head in the stand, like ostrich graphic that we can throw up at a moment's notice.
Well, let's not lose fact of the matter that maybe other than Kim, all of us are on private networks right now.
Right.
I am.
Yeah, no. Doug, what is the stat?
Huh?
What is the stat? Like 95%, 90% of people on broadband in the U.S. are in the top like 10 cable and telephone companies, probably on that order.
The cable company, just Charter and Comcast alone, have 55% of all cable customers in the U.S. All broadband customers.
In
Just those
California,
two
I think
companies.
in California, I think it's 95% of people on broadband get it from one of 5 companies,
Right,
and that's because that's in part because of a history of poor regulation. Because people in Congress in the states said, if we just let these private companies do whatever they want, then we'll end up in a better place. And those companies combined, and we ended up in a worse place. We have better connection than we did 20 years ago. But if we'd gone down a better path, we would be in a much better position right now.
Hold on. Much better position than having a streaming content show like this that People are using cable, satellite networks, wireless networks, and everything to produce. Let's not lose focus how far we've come since 1995. This is pretty amazing what we have going on right now.
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and this is the thing that the cable and telephone lobbyists will try to conflate, is the difference between how cool it is that we have this different software and the fact that our networks are faster, with a question about what if we had more competition, and so you had more of a desire to invest. If Bruce Kushnick was here right now, he would remind us that we allowed the telephone companies to raise their telephone rates, regulated rates at the time, to much higher levels in return for a promise that they would build higher quality networks out to everyone. And then the states said, you don't have to do it anymore. When they said, you know what, it turns out it's hard to do that. And the states said, cool, you don't have to do it anymore. So like, there's a lot of ways in which we have put far more money than is necessary into the pockets of a few executives and a bunch of shareholders, including my 401k, I'm sure, like, because we have allowed those companies to run away with resources that should have been used to build better networks. Oh, Dustin, I think, had to actually do productive things rather than listen to me shouting.
I think maybe
that's my argument back to you. These networks are highly productive the way it is. So it's the question is, you always teeter on the fact of, is it cost? Because I think we need to get it through everyone. This is not going to get cheaper.
Oh, I actually think, no, I think it could get cheaper. Let's be clear. Like it is not going to get.
No way.
So Longmont, Colorado launched, 7 years ago, and they said $50 for life for gigabit. And people were like, not everyone, some people were like, that's cool. Other people were like, you crazy, you people are nuts. And you're going to be going in 10 years, you're going to be out of business. And they are in a position where when I talk to them, they are more aggressive about saying we might lower our rates before we would raise them because we are doing so well. And so, Travis, you've said this before, like if you stop building, you could lower your rates. You might, in fact, if you face some sort of weird competition, you would cut back on your build rate and you would lower your rates. The reason that companies like you offer the rates that are at the similar level of the Comcast and the AT&Ts and whatnot is not because of your costs. It is because of what you're turning around and putting into new plant. And so like that is the issue. Whereas over time, we can actually lower the rates because of the operating costs of these networks, I think. Doug, I'm going to tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right. There's a huge amount of profit in the big ISPs. I mean, it's so much margin. It's unbelievable.
You can tell it's tens of billions of dollars a year.
Right. Divide that by the number of people. It's a lot.
It's like networks my size and Kim's size. I mean, just health insurance alone went up 20% last year for our group.
Yeah.
You know, cost of capital. So UTOPIA.
How much does that compare to your build budget for next year? It's what, like 1%?
The interest is a lot of his build.
No, the interest. You take the interest, the cost of materials, the cost of labor, health insurance, shoot, the price of bacon nowadays. I mean, it's through the roof. The days of $20 internet are gone.
Oh, I agree. We're not going to see $20 internet. We might not see $50 internet, but I think $55, $60 internet right now is sustainable.
Okay, I don't disagree with you there, but I always get the sense everyone's like, internet.
Remember, I'm paying $100.
But
yeah,
okay.
I'd love to charge you $100. That'd be amazing.
I would pay you $100.
If I had $100 a month, oh my God, yeah.
Well, not everyone would pay you $100. I would pay you $100.
Is $50 or $60 a month sustainable for somebody who's building a network today?
Not forever.
Not for building the new network. While you're building the network, you have the pressure.
Network, yes, then you can make that happen. And I think that is where you were kind of going, Chris. It's a different situation of if you're stopping to build now and just maintaining and like having a cost structure, that could work. But how many of us are out there not building anymore besides the big guys?
That's my point, is that Comcast is increasing its passings by 1 or 2% a year, maybe on like an aggressive year, probably less. Like they're not in a situation like Travis's, right? Like they charge a ton because they can. Mm-hmm. If like over the next 5 years, Travis got a ton of money from the state of Minnesota to build out everywhere he wanted to build, and he finished building out. The year after that, like, yeah, your health insurance would still go up because we're never going to solve this freaking problem from what I can tell in the United States. Like other costs are going to go up, but you're still not going to be like, I have to increase my rates to $100 a month. You would be like, no, like I can run this network, at a reasonable cost to people because you're not trying to figure out how to make a $30 million salary, Travis.
No, I don't disagree with you there, but you got to remember, Kim's network size and ours is very similar in size. We're in a very different economic situation. than the operators that have 1,500 subscribers.
No, I agree, and I think that's important. And also in very rural areas,
Yeah.
you're not getting it for $50 a month in super rural areas. Probably there's a bunch of edge cases. I agree with. We got to wrap it up though.
Yeah.
Doug, why don't you've been uncharacteristically quiet.
I'm so sad that you just drove away our guest, because I was going to ask to see what was on his T-shirt, because that's important for this show. But he's gone.
Yeah, no, I asked him to come on for 15 minutes, and then we took it away. And
Well, he stayed until the rant.
he left. He did leave a note there. And I deeply appreciate Dustin coming on. And Dustin's been doing really great work. He's Marconi Society, and he are part of a mapping coalition. So if people want more interest, I suggest looking him up personally. We're gonna have to get out. I wanted to talk about Doug's post on Rural America is Losing Patients. I think that's terrific. Highly recommend people check it out. And I think that's a dynamic. And I think it could be followed shortly thereafter by urban people are losing patients as prices go up, and everyone thinks their broadband's getting better, and most people aren't going to see a change. This was fun. I think I probably got a little too ranty in the middle. Maybe we'll cut part of that out and make a shorter version of it where I'm not going on about market theory, which I need an editor that will just tell me I need a shut up button. But I really appreciate people making time this morning and having this conversation. It's been wonderful to talk about these topics.
I do want to point out the last 15 minutes, Travis's internet's come in and out and in and out and in and out. It's
sorry, that's been me doing that. Turning it off because we're going to do a little YouTube video after this. So I was kind of talking. Sorry, I was multitasking here, but I want to commend Team Starlink. Well done. This is the best mobile internet to date. So hopefully it keeps getting better. $150 a month too, by the way, Chris. Just so you know.
Well, it's 150
or 135 or something.
I thought it was 100 and then went to 110. What am I missing?
He's paying for the version
the
that you
mobile.
travel with.
I can turn it off when I'm not using it. So yeah. All right, there you go.
Let us know when you get some cats up there in the winter.
50 large, right, Kim? Well done. Woo, woo.
Well,
Thank you, Kim. Kim and I are going to be the traveling core at some shows next year, I think. And if we can get Travis and Doug there, we're going to do that. But we do want to take this show on the road, including to events like Net Inclusion and things like
Fiber
that.
Connect. Let's do Fiber Connect.
Sounds good.
All right. See you guys. Thank you. Well done.
Right, this has been another fun episode of Chris Rants a lot about macroeconomics. And connect this.